Let's Get Together *******, Let's Get Together by Isaac Asimov, illustrated by Engel. Transcriber's note: this text was produced from Infinity, February 1957. Extensive research did not uncover any evidence that the U.S. copyright on this publication was renewed. A kind of peace had endured for a century and people had forgotten what anything else was like. They would scarcely have known how to react had they discovered that a kind of war had finally come. Certainly, Elias Lynn, chief of the Bureau of Robotics, wasn't sure how he ought to react when he finally found out. The Bureau of Robotics was headquartered in Cheyenne, in line with the century-old trend toward decentralization, and Lynn stared dubiously at the young security officer from Washington who had brought the news. Elias Lynn was a large man, almost charmingly homely, with pale blue eyes that bulged a bit. Men weren't usually comfortable under the stare of those eyes, but the security officer remained calm. Lynn decided that his first reaction ought to be incredulity. Hell, it was incredulity. He just didn't believe it. He eased himself back in his chair and said, "How certain is the information?" The security officer, who had introduced himself as Ralph G. Breckenridge and had presented credentials to match, had the softness of youth about him, full lips, plump cheeks that flushed easily, and guileless eyes. His clothing was out of line with Cheyenne, but it suited a universally air-conditioned Washington, where security, despite everything, was still centered. Breckenridge flushed and said, "There's no doubt about it." "You people know all about them, I suppose," said Lynn, and was unable to keep a trace of sarcasm out of his tone. He was not particularly aware of his use of a slightly stressed pronoun in his reference to the enemy, the equivalent of capitalization in print. It was a cultural habit of this generation and the one preceding. No one said the East or the Reds or the Soviets or the Russians anymore. That would have been too confusing, since some of them weren't of the East, weren't Reds, Soviets, and especially not Russians. It was much simpler to say we and they, and much more precise. Travelers had frequently reported that they did the same in reverse. Over there, they were we, in the appropriate language, and we were they. Scarcely anyone gave thought to such things anymore. It was all quite comfortable and casual. There was no hatred, even. At the beginning, it had been called a Cold War. Now it was only a game, almost a good-natured game, with unspoken rules and a kind of decency about it. Lynn said, abruptly, "Why should they want to disturb the situation?" He rose and stood staring at a wall map of the world, split into two regions with faint edgings of color. An irregular portion on the left of the map was edged in a mild green. A smaller, but just as irregular, portion on the right of the map was bordered in a washed-out pink. We and they. The map hadn't changed much in a century. The loss of Formosa and the gain of East Germany some 80 years before had been the last territorial switch of importance. There had been another change, though, that was significant enough, and that was in the colors. 2 generations before, their territory had been a brooding, bloody red, ours a pure and undefiled white. Now there was a neutrality about the colors. Lin had seen their maps and it was the same on their side. They wouldn't do it, he said. They are doing it, said Breckenridge, and you had better accustom yourself to the fact. Of course, sir, I realize that it isn't pleasant to think that they may be that far ahead of us in robotics. His eyes remained as guileless as ever, but the hidden knife edges of the words plunged deep, and Lin quivered at the impact. Of course, that would account for why the chief of robotics learned of this so late and through a security officer at that. He had lost caste in the eyes of the government. If robotics had really failed in the struggle, Lin could expect no political mercy. Lin said wearily, even if what you say is true, they're not far ahead of us. We could build humanoid robots. Have we, sir? Yes. As a matter of fact, we have built a few models for experimental purposes. They were doing so 10 years ago. They've made 10 years progress since. Lin was disturbed. He wondered if his incredulity concerning the whole business were really the result of wounded pride and fear for his job and reputation. He was embarrassed by the possibility that this might be so, and yet he was forced into defense. He said, "Look, young man, the stalemate between them and us was never perfect in every detail, you know. They have always been ahead in one facet or another and we in some other facet or another. If they are ahead of us right now in robotics, it's because they've placed a greater proportion of their effort into robotics than we have. And that means that some other branch of endeavor has received a greater share of our efforts than it has of theirs. It would mean we're ahead in force field research or in hyperatomics, perhaps." Lin felt distressed at his own statement that the stalemate wasn't perfect. It was true enough, but that was the one great danger threatening the world. The world depended on the stalemate being as perfect as possible. If the small unevennesses that always existed overbalanced too far in one direction or the other, almost at the beginning of what had been the Cold War, both sides had developed thermonuclear weapons, and war became unthinkable. Competition switched from the military to the economic and psychological and had stayed there ever since. But always there was the driving effort on each side to break the stalemate, to develop a parry for every possible thrust, to develop a thrust that could not be parried in time, something that would make war possible again. And that was not because either side wanted war so desperately, but because both were afraid that the other side would make the crucial discovery first. For 100 years each side had kept the struggle even. And in the process, peace had been maintained for 100 years while, as byproducts of the continuously intensive research, force fields had been produced and solar energy and insect control and robots. Each side was making a beginning in the understanding of mentalics, which was the name given to the biochemistry and biophysics of thought. Each side had its outposts on the Moon and on Mars. Mankind was advancing in giant strides under forced draft. It was even necessary for both sides to be as decent and humane as possible among themselves, lest through cruelty and tyranny, friends be made for the other side. It couldn't be that the stalemate would now be broken and that there would be war. Lin said, I want to consult one of my men. I want his opinion. Is he trustworthy? Lin looked disgusted. Good Lord, what man in robotics has not been investigated and cleared to death by your people? Yes, I vouch for him. If you can't trust a man like Humphrey Carl Lazaro, then we're in no position to face the kind of attack you say they are launching, no matter what else we do. I've heard of Lazaro, said Breckenridge. Good. Does he pass? Yes. Then, I'll have him in and we'll find out what he thinks about the possibility that robots could invade the USA. Not exactly, said Breckenridge, softly. You still don't accept the full truth. Find out what he thinks about the fact that robots have already invaded the USA. Lazaro was the grandson of a Hungarian who had broken through what had then been called the Iron Curtain, and he had a comfortable above suspicion feeling about himself because of it. He was thick-set and balding with a pugnacious look graven forever on his snub face, but his accent was clear Harvard and he was almost excessively soft-spoken. To Lin, who was conscious that after years of administration he was no longer expert in the various phases of modern robotics, Lazaro was a comforting receptacle for complete knowledge. Lin felt better because of the man's mere presence. Lin said, What do you think? A scowl twisted Lazaro's face ferociously. That they're that far ahead of us. Completely incredible. It would mean they've produced humanoids that could not be told from humans at close quarters. It would mean a considerable advance in robomentalics. You're personally involved, said Breckenridge, coldly. Leaving professional pride out of account, exactly why is it impossible that they be ahead of us? Lazaro shrugged. I assure you that I'm well acquainted with their literature on robotics. I know approximately where they are. You know approximately where they want you to think they are, is what you really mean, corrected Breckenridge. Have you ever visited the other side? I haven't, said Lazaro, shortly. Nor you, Dr. Lin. Lin said, No, I haven't, either. Breckenridge said, Has any robotics man visited the other side in 25 years? He asked the question with a kind of confidence that indicated he knew the answer. For a matter of seconds, the atmosphere was heavy with thought. Discomfort crossed Lazaro's broad face. He said, as a matter of fact, they haven't held any conferences on robotics in a long time. In 25 years, said Breckenridge. Isn't that significant? Maybe, said Lazaro, reluctantly. Something else bothers me, though. None of them have ever come to our conferences on robotics. None that I can remember. Were they invited? Asked Breckenridge. Lin, staring and worried, interposed quickly, Of course. Breckenridge said, Do they refuse attendance to any other types of scientific conferences we hold? I don't know, said Laszlo. He was pacing the floor now. I haven't heard of any cases. Have you, Chief? No, said Lynn. Breckenridge said, wouldn't you say it was as though they didn't want to be put in the position of having to return any such invitation? Or as though they were afraid one of their men might talk too much? That was exactly how it seemed, and Lynn felt a helpless conviction that security's story was true after all steel over him. Why else had there been no contact between sides on robotics? There had been a cross-fertilizing trickle of researchers moving in both directions on a strictly one-for-one basis for years, dating back to the days of Eisenhower and Khrushchev. There were a great many good motives for that. An honest appreciation of the supranational character of science, impulses of friendliness that are hard to wipe out completely in the individual human being, the desire to be exposed to a fresh and interesting outlook and to have your own slightly stale notions greeted by others as fresh and interesting. The governments themselves were anxious that this continue. There was always the obvious thought that by learning all you could and telling as little as you could, your own side would gain by the exchange. But not in the case of robotics. Not there. Such a little thing to carry conviction. And a thing, moreover, they had known all along. Lynn thought, darkly, we've taken the complacent way out. Because the other side had done nothing publicly on robotics, it had been tempting to sit back smugly and be comfortable in the assurance of superiority. Why hadn't it seemed possible, even likely, that they were hiding superior cards, a trump hand, for the proper time? Laszlo said, shakenly, what do we do? It was obvious that the same line of thought had carried the same conviction to him. Do, parroted Lynn. It was hard to think right now of anything but of the complete horror that came with conviction. There were 10 humanoid robots somewhere in the United States, each one carrying a fragment of a TC bomb. TC. The race for sheer horror in Bombery had ended there. TC. Total conversion. The sun was no longer a synonym one could use. Total conversion made the sun a penny candle. 10 humanoids, each completely harmless in separation, could, by the simple act of coming together, exceed critical mass and, Lynn rose to his feet heavily, the dark pouches under his eyes, which ordinarily lent his ugly face a look of savage foreboding, more prominent than ever. It's going to be up to us to figure out ways and means of telling a humanoid from a human and then finding the humanoids. How quickly, muttered Laszlo. Not later than 5 minutes before they get together, barked Lynn, and I don't know when that will be. Breckenridge nodded. I'm glad you're with us now, sir. I'm to bring you back to Washington for conference, you know. Lynn raised his eyebrows. All right. He wondered if, had he delayed longer in being convinced, he might not have been replaced forthwith, if some other chief of the Bureau of Robotics might not be conferring in Washington. He suddenly wished earnestly that exactly that had come to pass. The first presidential assistant was there, the Secretary of Science, the Secretary of Security, Lynn himself, and Breckinridge. 5 of them sitting about a table in the dungeons of an underground fortress near Washington. Presidential Assistant Jeffries was an impressive man, handsome in a white head and just a trifle jowly fashion, solid, thoughtful and as unobtrusive, politically, as a presidential assistant ought to be. He spoke incisively. There are 3 questions that face us as I see it. First, when are the humanoids going to get together? Second, where are they going to get together? Third, how do we stop them before they get together? Secretary of Science Amberley nodded convulsively at that. He had been Dean of Northwestern Engineering before his appointment. He was thin, sharp-featured and noticeably edgy. His forefinger traced slow circles on the table. As far as when they'll get together, he said. I suppose it's definite that it won't be for some time. Why do you say that? Asked Lynn, sharply. They've been in the US at least a month already. So security says. Lynn turned automatically to look at Breckinridge, and Secretary of Security McAllister intercepted the glance. McAllister said, "The information is reliable. Don't let Breckinridge's apparent youth fool you, Dr. Lynn. That's part of his value to us. Actually, he's 34 and has been with the department for 10 years. He has been in Moscow for nearly a year, and without him, none of this terrible danger would be known to us. As it is, we have most of the details. Not the crucial ones," said Lynn. McAllister of Security smiled frostily. His heavy chin and close-set eyes were well known to the public, but almost nothing else about him was. He said, "We are all finitely human, Dr. Lynn. Agent Breckinridge has done a great deal." Presidential Assistant Jeffries cut in. "Let us say we have a certain amount of time. If action at the instant were necessary, it would have happened before this. It seems likely that they are waiting for a specific time. If we knew the place, perhaps the time would become self-evident. If they are going to TC a target, they will want to cripple us as much as possible, so it would seem that a major city would have to be it. In any case, a major metropolis is the only target worth a TC bomb. I think there are 4 possibilities: Washington, as the administrative center, New York, as the financial center, and Detroit and Pittsburgh as the 2 chief industrial centers." McAllister of Security said, "I vote for New York. Administration and industry have both been decentralized to the point where the destruction of any one particular city won't prevent instant retaliation." "Then why New York?" asked Amberley of Science, perhaps more sharply than he intended. "Finance has been decentralized as well. A question of morale. It may be they intend to destroy our will to resist, to induce surrender by the sheer horror of the first blow. The greatest destruction of human life would be in the New York metropolitan area, Pretty cold-blooded, muttered Lin. I know, said McAllister of Security, but they are capable of it, if they thought it would mean final victory at a stroke. Wouldn't we? Presidential Assistant Jeffries brushed back his white hair. Let's assume the worst. Let's assume that New York will be destroyed sometime during the winter, preferably immediately after a serious blizzard when communications are at their worst and the disruption of utilities and food supplies in fringe areas will be most serious in their effect. Now, how do we stop them? Amber Lee of Science could only say, finding 10 men in 220 million is an awfully small needle in an awfully large haystack. Jeffries shook his head. You have it wrong. 10 humanoids among 220 million humans. No difference, said Amber Lee of Science. We don't know that a humanoid can be differentiated from a human at sight. Probably not. He looked at Lin. They all did. Lin said heavily, we in Cheyenne couldn't make one that would pass as human in the daylight. But they can, said McAllister of Security, and not only physically. We're sure of that. They've advanced mentalic procedures to the point where they can reel off the microelectronic pattern of the brain and focus it on the positronic pathways of the robot. Lin stared. Are you implying that they can create the replica of a human being complete with personality and memory? I do. Of specific human beings. That's right. Is this also based on Agent Breckenridge's findings? Yes. The evidence can't be disputed. Lin bent his head in thought for a moment. Then he said, then 10 men in the United States are not men but humanoids. But the originals would have had to be available to them. They couldn't be Orientals, who would be too easy to spot, so they would have to be East Europeans. How would they be introduced into this country, then? With the radar network over the entire world border as tight as a drum, how could they introduce any individual, human or humanoid, without our knowing it? McAllister of Security said, it can be done. There are certain legitimate seepages across the border. Businessmen, pilots, even tourists. They're watched, of course, on both sides. Still 10 of them might have been kidnapped and used as models for humanoids. The humanoids would then be sent back in their place. Since we wouldn't expect such a substitution, it would pass us by. If they were Americans to begin with, there would be no difficulty in their getting into this country. It's as simple as that. And even their friends and family could not tell the difference. We must assume so. Believe me, we've been waiting for any report that might imply sudden attacks of amnesia or troublesome changes in personality. We've checked on thousands. Amber Lee of Science stared at his fingertips. I think ordinary measures won't work. The attack must come from the Bureau of Robotics and I depend on the chief of that bureau. Again eyes turned sharply, expectantly, on Lin. Lin felt bitterness rise. It seemed to him that this was what the conference came to and was intended for. Nothing that had been said had not been said before. He was sure of that. There was no solution to the problem, no pregnant suggestion. It was a device for the record, a device on the part of men who gravely feared defeat and who wished the responsibility for it placed clearly and unequivocally on someone else. And yet there was justice in it. It was in robotics that we had fallen short. And Lin was not Lin merely. He was Lin of robotics, and the responsibility had to be his. He said, "I will do what I can." He spent a wakeful night, and there was a haggardness about both body and soul when he sought and attained another interview with Presidential Assistant Jeffries the next morning. Breckenridge was there, and though Lin would have preferred a private conference, he could see the justice in the situation. It was obvious that Breckenridge had attained enormous influence with the government as a result of his successful intelligence work. "Well, why not?" Lin said, "Sir, I am considering the possibility that we are hopping uselessly to enemy piping." "In what way?" "I'm sure that however impatient the public may grow at times, and however legislators sometimes find it expedient to talk, the government at least recognizes the world stalemate to be beneficial. They must recognize it also. 10 humanoids with 1 TC bomb is a trivial way of breaking the stalemate. The destruction of 15 million human beings is scarcely trivial. It is from the world power standpoint. It would not so demoralize us as to make us surrender, or so cripple us as to convince us we could not win. There would just be the same old planetary death war that both sides have avoided so long and so successfully. And all they would have accomplished is to force us to fight -1 city. It's not enough." "What do you suggest?" said Jeffries, coldly. "That they do not have 10 humanoids in our country. That there is not a TC bomb waiting to get together. I'll agree that those things are here, but perhaps for some reason greater than just midwinter bomb madness. Such as, it may be that the physical destruction resulting from the humanoids getting together is not the worst thing that can happen to us. What about the moral and intellectual destruction that comes of their being here at all? With all due respect to Agent Breckenridge, what if they intended for us to find out about the humanoids? What if the humanoids are never supposed to get together, but merely to remain separate in order to give us something to worry about? Why? Tell me this. What measures have already been taken against the humanoids? I suppose that security is going through the files of all citizens who have ever been across the border or close enough to it to make kidnapping possible. I know, since McAllister mentioned it yesterday, that they are following up suspicious psychiatric cases. What else? Jeffries said, small X-ray devices are being installed in key places in the large cities. In the mass arenas, for instance, where 10 humanoids might slip in among 100,000 spectators of a football game or an air polo match. Exactly. And concert halls and churches. We must start somewhere. We can't do it all at once. Particularly when panic must be avoided, said Lin. Isn't that so? It wouldn't do to have the public realize that at any unpredictable moment, some unpredictable city and its human contents would suddenly cease to exist. I suppose that's obvious. What are you driving at? Lynn said strenuously, that a growing fraction of our national effort will be diverted entirely into the nasty problem of what Amberley called finding a very small needle in a very large haystack. We'll be chasing our tails madly, while they increase their research lead to the point where we find we can no longer catch up, when we must surrender without the chance even of snapping our fingers in retaliation. Consider further that this news will leak out as more and more people become involved in our countermeasures and more people begin to guess what we're doing. Then what? The panic might do us more harm than any one TC bomb. The presidential assistant said, irritably, in heaven's name, man, what do you suggest we do, then? Nothing, said Lynn. Call their bluff. Live as we have lived and gamble that they won't dare break the stalemate for the sake of a one-bomb head start. Impossible, said Jeffries. Completely impossible. The welfare of all of us is very largely in my hands, and doing nothing is the one thing I cannot do. I agree with you, perhaps, that X-ray machines at sports arenas are a kind of skin-deep measure that won't be effective, but it has to be done so that people, in the aftermath, do not come to the bitter conclusion that we tossed our country away for the sake of a subtle line of reasoning that encouraged do-nothingism. In fact, our counter-gambit will be active indeed. In what way? Presidential Assistant Jeffries looked at Breckenridge. The young security officer, hitherto calmly silent, said, "It's no use talking about a possible future break in the stalemate when the stalemate is broken now. It doesn't matter whether these humanoids explode or do not. Maybe they are only a bait to divert us, as you say. But the fact remains that we are a quarter of a century behind in robotics, and that may be fatal. What other advances in robotics will there be to surprise us if war does start? The only answer is to divert our entire force immediately, now, into a crash program of robotics research, and the first problem is to find the humanoids. Call it an exercise in robotics, if you will, or call it the prevention of the death of 15 million men, women and children." Lynn shook his head, helplessly. "You can't. You'd be playing into their hands. They want us lured into the one blind alley while they're free to advance in all other directions." Jeffries said, impatiently, "That's your guess. Breckenridge has made his suggestion through channels and the government has approved, and we will begin with an all-science conference." "All science?" Breckenridge said, "We have listed every important scientist of every branch of natural science. They'll all be at Cheyenne. There will be only one point on the agenda: how to advance robotics. The major specific subheading under that will be, how to develop a receiving device for the electromagnetic fields of the cerebral cortex that will be sufficiently delicate to distinguish between a protoplasmic human brain and a positronic humanoid brain." Jeffries said, "We had hoped you would be willing to be in charge of the conference. I was not consulted in this. Obviously time was short, sir. Do you agree to be in charge?" Lin smiled briefly. It was a matter of responsibility again. The responsibility must be clearly that of Lin of robotics. He had the feeling it would be Breckenridge who would really be in charge. But what could he do? He said, "I agree." Breckenridge and Lin returned together to Cheyenne, where that evening Lazlo listened with a sullen mistrust to Lin's description of coming events. Lazlo said, "While you were gone, Chief, I've started putting 5 experimental models of humanoid structure through the testing procedures. Our men are on a 12-hour day, with 3 shifts overlapping. If we've got to arrange a conference, we're going to be crowded and red-taped out of everything. Work will come to a halt." Breckenridge said, "That will be only temporary. You will gain more than you lose." Lazlo scowled. "A bunch of astrophysicists and geochemists around won't help a damn toward robotics. Views from specialists of other fields may be helpful." "Are you sure? How do we know that there is any way of detecting brain waves, or that, even if we can, there is a way of differentiating human and humanoid by wave pattern? Who set up the project, anyway?" "I did," said Breckenridge. "You did? Are you a robotics man?" The young security agent said, calmly, "I have studied robotics." "That's not the same thing. I've had access to text material dealing with Russian robotics, in Russian. Top secret material well in advance of anything you have here." Lin said, ruefully, "He has us there, Lazlo." "It was on the basis of that material," Breckenridge went on, "that I suggested this particular line of investigation. It is reasonably certain that in copying off the electromagnetic pattern of a specific human mind into a specific positronic brain, a perfectly exact duplicate cannot be made. For one thing, the most complicated positronic brain small enough to fit into a human-sized skull is hundreds of times less complex than the human brain. It can't pick up all the overtones, therefore, and there must be some way to take advantage of that fact." Lazlo looked impressed despite himself, and Lin smiled grimly. It was easy to resent Breckenridge and the coming intrusion of several hundred scientists of non-robotics specialties, but the problem itself was an intriguing one. There was that consolation, at least. It came to him quietly. Lin found he had nothing to do but sit in his office alone, with an executive position that had grown merely titular. Perhaps that helped. It gave him time to think, to picture the creative scientists of half the world converging on Cheyenne. It was Breckenridge who, with cool efficiency, was handling the details of preparation. There had been a kind of confidence in the way he said, "Let's get together and we'll lick them." Let's get together. It came to Lin so quietly that anyone watching Lin at that moment might have seen his eyes blink slowly twice, but surely nothing more. He did what he had to do with a whirling detachment that kept him calm when he felt that, by all rights, he ought to be going mad. He sought out Breckenridge in the others' improvised quarters. Breckenridge was alone and frowning. "Is anything wrong, sir?" Lynn said, wearily, "Everything's right, I think. I've invoked martial law." "What?" "As chief of a division I can do so if I am of the opinion the situation warrants it. Over my division, I can then be dictator. Chalk up one for the beauties of decentralization. You will rescind that order immediately." Breckenridge took a step forward. "When Washington hears this, you will be ruined." "I'm ruined anyway. Do you think I don't realize that I've been set up for the role of the greatest villain in American history, the man who let them break the stalemate? I have nothing to lose, and perhaps a great deal to gain." He laughed a little wildly. "What a target the division of robotics will be, eh, Breckenridge? Only a few thousand men to be killed by a TC bomb capable of wiping out 300 square miles in 1 microsecond. But 500 of those men would be our greatest scientists. We would be in the peculiar position of having to fight a war with our brains shot out, or surrendering. I think we'd surrender. But this is impossible. Lynn, do you hear me? Do you understand? How could the humanoids pass our security provisions? How could they get together? But they are getting together. We're helping them to do so. We're ordering them to do so. Our scientists visit the other side, Breckenridge. They visit them regularly. You made a point of how strange it was that no one in robotics did. Well, 10 of those scientists are still there and in their place. 10 humanoids are converging on Cheyenne. That's a ridiculous guess. I think it's a good one, Breckenridge. But it wouldn't work unless we knew humanoids were in America so that we would call the conference in the first place. Quite a coincidence that you brought the news of the humanoids and suggested the conference and suggested the agenda and are running the show and know exactly which scientists were invited. Did you make sure the right 10 were included?" "Dr. Lynn," cried Breckenridge in outrage. He poised to rush forward. Lynn said, "Don't move. I've got a blaster here. We'll just wait for the scientists to get here one by one. One by one we'll X-ray them. One by one, we'll monitor them for radioactivity. No two will get together without being checked, and if all 500 are clear, I'll give you my blaster and surrender to you. Only I think we'll find the 10 humanoids." "Sit down, Breckenridge." They both sat. Lynn said, "We wait. When I'm tired, Lazaro will spell me." We wait. Professor Manuel Jimenez of the Institute of Higher Studies of Buenos Aires exploded while the stratospheric jet on which he traveled was 3 miles above the Amazon Valley. It was a simple chemical explosion, but it was enough to destroy the plane. Dr. Hermann Leibowitz of MIT exploded in a monorail, killing 20 people and injuring 100 others. In similar manner, Dr. Auguste Marin of l'Institut Nu Clinique of Montreal and 7 others died at various stages of their journey to Cheyenne. Laszlo hurtled in, pale-faced and stammering, with the first news of it. It had only been 2 hours that Lynn had sat there, facing Breckenridge, blaster in hand. Laszlo said, "I thought you were nuts, Chief, but you were right. They were humanoids. They had to be." He turned to stare with hate-filled eyes at Breckenridge. Only they were warned. He warned them, and now there won't be one left intact. Not one to study. "God!" cried Lynn, and in a frenzy of haste thrust his blaster out toward Breckenridge and fired. The security man's neck vanished, the torso fell, the head dropped, thudded against the floor and rolled crookedly. Lynn moaned, "I didn't understand, I thought he was a traitor." Nothing more. And Laszlo stood immobile, mouth open, for the moment incapable of speech. Lynn said, wildly, "Sure, he warned them. But how could he do so while sitting in that chair unless he were equipped with built-in radio transmission? Don't you see it? Breckenridge had been in Moscow. The real Breckenridge is still there. Oh my God, there were 11 of them." Laszlo managed a hoarse squeak. Why didn't he explode? He was hanging on, I suppose, to make sure the others had received his message and were safely destroyed. Lord, when you brought the news and I realized the truth, I couldn't shoot fast enough. God knows by how few seconds I may have beaten him to it." Laszlo said, shakily, "At least, we'll have one to study." He bent and put his fingers on the sticky fluid trickling out of the mangled remains at the neck end of the headless body. Not blood, but high-grade machine oil. Asterisk end of the Project Gutenberg ebook. Let's get together. Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, Check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, If you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116. 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.